Hi, it's Dee from Inspired Health by Dee, and I'm really excited to be here today to chat with you about endometriosis and hope. And so I wanted to welcome my guest today, Krystal Wilson from She Who Dares Coaching. Welcome, Krystal.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here to have a chat with me. With my own endo journey, I found that when I was like right in the middle of it, that I was really struggling, and that I thought that endo would always rule my life, and that I would always be in pain, and that I didn't feel like I had hope. And fast forward 5 years with my own journey, so since I had my official diagnosis and my surgery, and lots of other things I've done in between with nutrition and lifestyle, I've found that I'm in a very different place. And I was thinking about, well, how do I provide hope back to the endo community? Because there's so many women that are struggling. And I see this in the clinic when I work with clients with endo, as well as in the social media groups for endo, period pain, hormone issues and things like that. And there's so many women that are struggling. And what I find, those groups are fantastic for support and for education, and for women feeling like they're not alone. But there's often not that other side of it, where there are women doing amazing things and living with endo. So I thought, well, what a better way than to interview women who are doing cool things in their communities and in their lives with their families, and the things that matter to them, and so they can share their journey and share their message of hope. So today I'm excited to hear your story. So did you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your endo story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually first diagnosed with endometriosis in 2018. And the reason that I was officially diagnosed was that I had a laparoscopy. I always feel like I say that wrong. And they obviously found endometriosis. And the reason that I was diagnosed so late was that I'd been on a fertility journey. So I'd been at that point maybe trying for 2.5, 3 years to fall pregnant. And I'd been diagnosed with PCOS, and I was pretty certain that I had endometriosis, but I had never been properly diagnosed because I'd never had the surgery. And so it was an exploratory surgery to see if I had endometriosis, and there's a few other things fertility wise they wanted to check. And so that's when I was first diagnosed. But for my whole life, since I first started my period, I thought that I had endometriosis because of the pain and the heavy bleeding, and mainly the pain, and just how bad my periods were. They weren't like my other friends around me. I felt like they were able to function a bit more on their periods, whereas I always struggled with really, really intense pain, intense bleeding, vomiting, headaches. It used to take me out. That's kind of how I first, and I think when I was about 16, I got my period when I was 12. And I think at around 16, I went to go and get diagnosed. This is in like 1999, maybe 2000. Wow. And I remember they were like, yes, based on your symptoms, there's a possibility that you have endometriosis. But they wanted me to, I don't know if this is how they diagnosed back then, but they wanted me to spend the next 6 months documenting, like every day, how I felt and what symptoms I had. And if after 6 months of documenting how I was feeling, my pain and symptoms, then they would look at possibly the surgery. I think, I can't remember, but that documentation over 6 months was to lead to a proper diagnosis. But I was like 16 at the time. I couldn't commit to anything for, 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just never did that, classic 16-year-old, and just kind of went on suffering. But in my mind, I felt that I had it. I just had never been properly diagnosed. So it wasn't something that I shared. I didn't really tell people that I had endometriosis because I didn't really know. I just knew that I had really painful and uncomfortable periods.
It's interesting. I haven't actually heard that as a method, but I mean, that was a while ago.
Okay, yeah.
I guess the frustrating thing about, well, number one, a 16-year-old is not going to do that. And
Right?
the other thing is that because endo presents in so many different ways, that it may not necessarily point to that anyway. Because I don't know if you know, there's women who have endo who don't have any symptoms.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so learning about it. Like the more women I speak to, the more I read, the more that I learn more about endometriosis. I definitely don't know it all. I don't even know probably all the information about my own experience with endometriosis. So it's fascinating. I always thought after I got the diagnosis, they only removed a little bit of endo. There wasn't actually a lot, but I've had a lot of stomach and bowel problems. That's been my number one thing that I've had to manage. And so I did it through the public system. And I actually don't think they checked my bowels. I think they checked where they needed to check for fertility in that specific region. And so I've always felt that if I was to maybe go and have another surgery, it'd be more around my bowels, because I've learned that one of the symptoms of endometriosis is a lot of gut problems. And that is like been my life on top of like the pain, but the constant daily problem has been gut health for me.
Yeah, and that happens with a lot of women too. I have a friend who got diagnosed with endo, and she had no pain. She had no period pain. It was all gut related, and so then she went down the whole route of, well, is it IBS? Is it all these other things? And nothing showed up until she had a laparoscopy, and they said, oh no, it's actually endo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think where they moved the piece of it, like the scar tissue was close to my bowel, but because I didn't go in specifically, just that laparoscopy wasn't just for endometriosis. That was like one of the 5 things that they were doing that day. And so I feel like they were focused on, I had a polyp that was needed to be removed and other things like that. So it wasn't like the only focus of that surgery. So that's why I don't know if they did like, a proper, if I was going in just for endometriosis, I feel like it would have been a full check everything situation, but I don't feel like, I feel like they stumbled across some and they removed it.
Yeah, and that can happen because some and I don't know how much research you or how much you know about this, but I guess it's a good thing to still mention is that there's 2 ways to remove endo. Did you know this?
No.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways to remove endo. One is a burning method and one is a cutting method. And the burning method is often what regular gynos do or obstetricians do. And then there's the other method, which is the cutting method, and more advanced trained specialists do that particular method. And you tend to get better relief from the other method. So if there are women who have endo, then it's a good idea to try to see that type of specialist. But that doesn't always happen because it's just the way the journey is.
Yeah.
You generally see your normal gyno, and then further down the track, you might end up seeing an advanced trained specialist. So what's happened in the 3 years since the diagnosis for you?
I think definitely my pain has improved. Absolutely. Like I feel like I go through waves. Like sometimes I'm okay around my period, and sometimes it's really bad. It might be really bad for like a 6-month period, but I definitely had improvement in my pain. And, to be honest with you, we've just been so focused on fertility. We're still going through fertility. We've just done in October, November last year, IVF. We've just done our first embryo transfer that wasn't successful. So we've like the endometriosis hasn't been the focus. We were looking for reasons as to why we've been on such a long fertility journey. So in terms of managing my endometriosis, that's gotten lost in fertility treatments.
Yeah, I know that's hard.
I'm still taking lots of things, but the focus is like getting me pregnant, I suppose, versus treating the endometriosis or treating the PCOS.
Yeah. Do you find though that it's similar in some ways though, because it's making sure that your body is at optimal?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's more about like the focus has been this, but I suppose I'm still treating it and still managing it, but it's been more about fertility versus the endo. But it definitely has improved after the surgery. But that was a couple of years ago now. So yeah, it's not a few, maybe I think last year I thought I might need to go and get another surgery because I was getting lots of pain again. But it's so hard to know. I feel like when you've got endometriosis, you've got a really high pain threshold. So like this has been my, like to me, like the worst is like I'm in so much pain that I can't move and I'm vomiting, right? Like that's my level 10. So anything below that, I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
I'm okay.
I'm okay. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
so I feel like my lower levels are probably worse than your average woman's period, 100%, but I'm just so used to that. Yeah, so the hardest thing is managing the work that I do with it, because I try to track my cycle as much as possible, but I could just have a really bad, period, and I have to like cancel all my clients. So I've got to take painkillers and water bottles and kind of just be in bed. So that's how it disrupts my life, but I just manage it as best as possible and ask for sympathy from my clients. And I have to reschedule today, but they're all pretty amazing.
And that's such a long journey though. Like that, did you say 99 to 2018?
Oh, I think it was 1999 or 2000 that I went to the doctor for the first time about it. That's the only time I went to the doctor. And then it was the next time I was going to doctors about that type of stuff. It was first it was my Pcos diagnosis. I started to get all of these like problems and gaining weight. So then I got that diagnosis. And then 2 years later, then it was like, okay, let's look at the pain. Let's look at the endometriosis possible diagnosis. So yeah, it's definitely been a long journey, but I speak to some women and I read stories of women who have got endometriosis where it is debilitating. And even though I have had debilitating moments and days, that's not my everyday life. So I feel like I definitely don't have it as bad as other women out there. I just hear their stories and it's just like, wow, I really have a lot of empathy and compassion.
Yeah, but your pain is still valid too.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but some women have got it bad, some women have got it and they're not heard, they're not seen, and they're very alone in their level of how much it's affecting their life. And so, yes, it's affected my life. And yes, my pain is valid, but I just can't, I suppose when you have it, I can't imagine it being any worse.
Yeah.
Right. And it being an everyday thing, not just around period or ovulation for me. Some women are like, that's their day.
It's every day.
That to me, knowing when I have it only a couple times a month, like I can't imagine living with that level of pain and discomfort every day. That's just, my heart goes out to them.
I know, it's so hard. So many, they struggle, and then it has the impact not only physically but then emotionally, socially, work-wise, financially. It can have such a big impact on all of their life. Totally. Yeah.
And it's so much like, I know for me, like there's so much shame and guilt around that it does affect me when it does affect me. Like it's almost like, I think we're changing, but I think there's this real like, oh, I've got my period and I'm working type, you know what I mean? Like, or like it's not acceptable for a woman to be sick or not be able to show up or not be able to go to work because of her period. Because the truth is most women are able to function very normally on their period. So I think I've always felt like this, there's a lot of shame attached to, not if shame is the right word, but I feel guilty. I feel like maybe you start to think, which I think would be so common, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe it's not as bad. Maybe I'm being weak, or maybe I should be pushing through. Like you start to think because other people are able to function normally, but then we're not like other people, I guess. So.
Oh, and that comes from a few different things. I think it's like you said, some women have no issues with their period, so they can, it has no impact. But then you get other women who are really, really struggling, and we've been taught to think that it's period pain's normal. So then it's like that whole element of, well, you have to just get on with it. And that's not good to do that as a woman.
Yeah, I feel like now, like people like yourself, there's definitely more of a spotlight on this. Like I see so much in my feed on Instagram, people openly sharing and talking about it, which I think is brilliant. But you know, in my 20s, and I'm 37 now, my 20s and early 30s, like it felt like before I was diagnosed, like I was, you know, being a fuss, like making a problem. Like I don't feel that. I felt like every time I've had to call in sick, or even now when I have to reschedule a client, I find myself explaining and probably going into, you know, oh, I've got it, like trying to like give them a reason as to why this is happening, because I feel really guilty. Like I'm a woman, I should just be showing up like the rest of the women who are on their period, but it is different. But I don't know.
It's different because it's not just a painful period. It can affect the whole body. And
Yeah.
you know, like you said, your bowel, and some women get migraines, some women get like the ovulation pain, the pain, but it's not just a little cramp. It can be really, really bad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, when it's really bad, like I am in a ball curled up, like I'm, you know what I mean? There's no way that I could function or serve other people in those moments. But it's not always like that. But when it's at its worst, that's where it is. And I said the pain can be, you know, so intense that I vomit. And that's happened to me many times where I'm, you know, in a ball dying in pain, and then I'm in the bathroom vomiting and diarrhea. And it's like a whole, like your body's going through this whole thing. It's not fun. And for me, just like one of those symptoms is like incredibly heavy bleeding. Like I'm not someone who can go out and function on their period. Like I'm home, I'm double padded, and you know, I'm going through a new pair of pants every hour. You know what I mean? If I'm not on top of it, like it's not a fun time.
Yeah, that's hard. That's so
Yeah.
hard. And so in those 18 years, there wasn't anyone that kind of, the doctors never really said, oh, well, hang on, that something might be going on.
Well, I never went to the doctor for it until when I was like 6. And that was because I started vomiting. But it was interesting. I was actually with my mum and her best friend of like forever, who I grew up around. And it was interesting because we were talking about it just the other day. And she said, that doesn't surprise me because I remember you always having really bad periods. And so it was interesting, someone who I hadn't seen in 15 years, who knew me as a, you know, from that 12 to probably, I think I was 12 when I got my period. So 12 to 15, those couple of years where she remembers how bad they were. Whereas I don't remember every time. I just remember certain moments where I was like, I don't think this is normal. I don't think I'm meant to be vomiting in the toilet from pain, or like leaving school and just going home and dying. Yeah, so that was interesting. I feel like, again, maybe back then it wasn't as known. And also I think, you know, my mum, I've asked her, she's never had any issues with her cycle or pain or period that was abnormal. But I think that's part of the problem, is that people just say, oh, that's just bad period pain.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get into that habit. And I experienced that a lot in my life, where I was like in a lot of pain, suffering, and the women around me, friends, women around, would just be like, that's just, oh, you just got bad period pain. There wasn't enough understanding or empathy, not empathy, or I don't know the right word, but I feel like it was.
I think it's understanding because I think the women, and so the mums and the grandmas, it's not that they didn't have empathy, but they didn't know any better either. They were just doing the best with what they knew at the time as well. And so because they got told the same thing, period pain's normal. You don't need to do anything about it. It's starting to change.
Absolutely. Now, if I had a daughter, even if I didn't have this experience, if I had a daughter who was suffering at all with her period, it would be a red flag and I would be at the doctor. I just think it's a different time because now it's something that's spoken about. People know about it. It's not this thing that half the doctors don't believe are real. And that's probably why the doctor at 16 was like, okay, fill out a journal for the next 6 months, come back, because he probably thought I was being dramatic. you know what I mean? That's the word, is women are constantly made to feel like they're being dramatic because they've got their period, and or like we're using it to like do the Aussie thing of Aussie sick day. You know what I mean? I've got
yeah.
to come in. So yeah, times have changed, but
And it is starting to change also because of there's been so many different advancements from the fertility side of things too, is that often if there's fertility issues and women are going to get the laparoscopies done, and so that's kind of coming up a little bit earlier, and then those women are having conversations with their mums or their best friends or their aunties or their daughters, well, yeah, friends of friends and things. And so it's becoming, the conversation is starting to happen a lot more, becoming a lot more aware.
I think, and the woman on woman conversation, we spoke about this, is changing, because I know when I was in my 20s, my early adolescent and 20s, like I would say to a friend, oh my God, I've got really bad period pain. Like I'm in a lot of pain. And they would just say, yeah, I get really bad period pain too. And it was like, so therefore you're constantly made to feel like this is normal. Everyone has this. And I don't think maybe now it'll be different. I think women really hurt each other, right? When someone says you have like shares their experience with their period, a lot of women would just, maybe it's a way to connect, would just jump into the, oh yeah, I get really bad periods too, but they don't really get it, like what's happening. Like you either have endometriosis or you don't. So I feel like that conversation has changed as well, where women are listening to each other and hearing each other and honoring that we don't all have to have bad period pain. Like it's not a competition.
No, it's not a competition.
Period, but do you know what I'm saying? Like it's not a competition because I've got really bad periods that then you also have really bad periods. And you may if you've got endometriosis, but I find a lot of the time that conversation was like this kind of either trying to connect by having the same thing that wasn't really there, or in a competition of who's got the worst period. And
and pain, you can't understand how much someone else's pain is. And it's only now that women are starting to become, with endo and pain, we're becoming more aware of, like you said, the scale of 1 to 10. So you could say you have period pain and be a 1 out of 10, or you might have period pain that's endo pain that could be a 9 out of 10. Like that's very, very different on the scale.
Yes. And I feel like when I was in my 20s, I feel like a lot of my pain got dismissed in those moments, trying to share or be vulnerable about what I was experiencing. A lot of people would say, oh, that's normal, or I get bad period pain too, like suck it up, princess style thing. So therefore, a lot of the time you're getting dismissed. And then you start to think, oh, maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe I'm being weak or a wuss, or I don't know what the right word is, but dramatic feels like how I've felt about myself a lot of the time, like maybe I am being dramatic.
Do you have a suggestion of how you think that conversation could go slightly different if two women were having that conversation?
I think that if somebody is sharing anything about their life that's hard for them or something that they're struggling with, I think that we need to listen in all cases. So sometimes we're so quick to jump in and share what our experience is without really listening and hearing to someone. So I think that's changed. I feel like I'm talking about when I was growing up and where kind of women were at in their relationships with each other. It's a totally different conversation now. I feel that women are hearing each other. We are definitely less competitive with one another, and we are open to giving people space. So I feel like it's just a different time.
Yeah. And in saying that, the ways to treat endo have changed quite a lot over the years as well. And so traditionally, women who had really bad period pain and heavy bleeding would have a hysterectomy. That was just the normal thing. Whereas that's not necessarily, that's not the treatment for endo anymore. And so the grandmothers would be like, oh, I just had a hysterectomy. It was no big deal. We've learned a lot. Endo is a disease outside the uterus, so removing the uterus it's not a treatment. And also having a hysterectomy when you're really young can have a lot of impact as well. And that's not really
like
like that's so
but also like the emotional impact of having all of your womanly parts removed is like emotionally what that does, hormonally what that does. I mean, that just shows you where science and health care was, that it's like, oh, you know, now I find that in the world of health, we definitely are treating the root cause more. I know in the work that I do, I always treat the root cause. But I think back then, or even sometimes when you still go to the GP and you're like, I've got gut problems, and it's like, well, here's this to stop it or to manage it, versus looking at the root causes to why you have the gut problems or why you have the pain. So yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that that's not a treatment for endometriosis. And I know, I mean, I know so many women who are in their young 30s who have had a hysterectomy, who have tried everything and had multiple surgeries and heartbreakingly have had to have a hysterectomy to manage their pain and live some quality of life before they've had children. So it is still the last, you know what I mean? It's the last stop, but it's still happening. There are so many women out there who have had hysterectomies because they've had to, if they wanted to have any quality of life, and that's happened before they've had children. And now they're grieving the loss of never being able to have their own children.
Oh no, that's so hard.
So sad.
So hard. And it gets to the point, like you said, they're in daily pain, or the bleeding is so bad that they can't live a normal life, that ends up being what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know much about adenomyosis?
No, nothing.
So adenomyosis is a disease where growths grow in the uterus, and so often what happens is endo and adeno can occur together, and so some women have both, and that heavy bleeding can be attributed to that as well. And the way to treat that is hysterectomy. So when women have that particular disease and then they have a hysterectomy, they do get relief because there's no bleeding anymore, and they can get on with their life.
That's a huge loss if you haven't yet
had children. That's right. It's devastating.
Horrible situation to be put in.
Devastating, especially for really, really young women.
I know two women personally who are under 35 who have both had hysterectomies and have had to, before they've had children, and they both wanted children. That was part of their future. And it's so incredibly heartbreaking.
It's so hard. It's so hard. Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard. It goes back to the early intervention is a good thing too, because then you can put things in place earlier to treat things as well. Yeah, it's so sad, so sad. So what do you wish you knew earlier in your journey?
I mean, I read it now all the time and I'm like, what? Period pain's not normal. Like I read that all the time now and I'm like, wow, where was that when I was 16 and 18 and in my young 20s? Like, so I wish that I knew that that period pain wasn't normal.
So Krystal, do you have what's the message of hope that you would like to share?
Oh God. Well, I would say this, that all of us women have survived all of our worst days already, right? So we are survivors, we are warriors, and your situation, your pain, what you're going through is absolutely valid, and you will get through this. You know, I tell myself all the time, like whenever I am getting down or stressed or worried or thinking about the outcome I don't want, I always come back to, it always works out. I'll always be okay. I always land on my feet. So I think that just reminding ourselves of that is that we have survived all of our worst days up until this moment, and it will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that message. And so you work with women in your community. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that, or how women can work with you?
Absolutely. So my name is Krystal Wilson and I am the founder of She Who Dares Coaching. And so I do a lot of incredible mindset, empowerment, breakthrough coaching with women, helping them to heal what needs to be healed and break through their limiting beliefs, their internal blocks. It's really powerful work. And I think mindset is incredibly important on a journey where your body feels like it's letting you down and you've got daily pain. And I think that I have been able to manage my PCOS, my endometriosis, my fertility issues really well, like is because of the amount of mindset work that I have done. I speak to a lot of women who are really in their pain and their pain owns them. And when I say pain, I'm not talking just about physical pain, emotional pain. They're really in their stuff, and even infertility. And I am able to really manage that and stay what I would say above the line in my endometriosis, above the line in my my fertility journey, because of the work that I do on my mind and the work that I do with other women. So it's such an important part to learn to really master and manage your mindset.
Oh yeah, I agree. 100% agree that it makes such a big difference, because then you can lead a better life, a better version of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the fertility, like a lot of women will reach out to me and really share like how much they're really struggling, and rightfully so. Fertility is it can be a long and hard journey, but it's interesting how I notice how my experience is different. And I really put that down because of the work that I do on myself, is that I'm able to move through things quickly.
Yeah.
Which is a testament to that type of work. So She Who Dares Coaching is all about that. I do lots of really powerful and amazing work with women. And if that's something that anyone who's watching this does want to learn more about, they can reach out to me at She Who Dares on Facebook, my personal account, but I do a lot of stuff now on Instagram. So it's at _Krystal Wilson _ just reach out, follow me and see if you vibe.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing about your business and your community, and also about sharing your endo journey and all the things that have, made a difference to you as well, and your message of hope as well. I really appreciate it. And I've loved having chat with you, and, your beautiful energy as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.